Hello everyone, I'm Harry Mitsidis, the founder of NomadMania, and I'm in Athens today, and you have the unique opportunity of hearing my voice as deep as it'll ever get, because I've got bronchitis, laryngitis, you name it. But despite this, today I have the pleasure of welcoming someone really special. So with me in Athens today is none other than Orest Zub.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to welcome you to Greece, Orest, and I hope you've been enjoying the weather here.
Absolutely. We even thought to make this interview outside, but the sun is so aggressive, and we thought, okay, let's try inside.
Yeah, we ended up sticking to staying inside. So, Orest, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, your early years, and how you developed an interest in travel?
Yeah, so basically my name is Orest, which is interesting because it's a Greek name. However, I'm originally from Ukraine. I was born and grew up in the city of Lviv, which is an amazing town in western Ukraine. And at the moment, I visited over 120 countries. Guys, let's go. You can feel free to check my profile on the NomadMania website. Basically, being one of the biggest travelers among Ukrainians. But this travel bug got me in pretty early age, I would say. First of all, my parents were travelers themselves. So I was born in 1987, which is still was the Soviet Union back then, and they met each other in a local travel club. So basically, my father, my mother were traveling within their student travel club, like all around Siberia, Caucasus Mountains, Altai, and so on. So probably I was started somewhere in a tent in the mountains, who knows, yes, but definitely the travel spirit is in my genes. Okay. I could say so, yes, and fortunately for me, in the 90s, when Ukraine was already independent and I was a secondary school student, my parents were sending me almost every summer to various international camps for students, for children. Mostly in the neighboring countries to Ukraine, like Slovakia, Poland, Germany a few times, and so on. And this was, an idea that you should invest into intelligence, into development, into education. That's why I am very fortunate to my family. So going this way, since being like a young kid in my early teens, I started seeing the world. Which was rather a unique situation for a Ukrainian guy back then. And definitely your curiosity starts to develop from there. I maintained some pen-friendship relations with different people from European countries before the email still. So we were writing letters to each other.
Wow, okay.
Yes. And then when I enrolled into the university, I was studying law. I actually relied on different international exchange programs, some scholarship for students and so on, in order to see more of the world. It was then limited only to Europe because this academic life is active within, let's say, European community, and my university was taking part in different international programs with other universities. So I was very active. I basically, maybe a third of my academic time in the late years in the university, I spent traveling around Europe, participating in the conferences, being a speaker, preparing some essays, and so on.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
as you were traveling in Europe then, as a student, what would you say surprised you? What did you discover which challenged your way of thinking, which made you think maybe out of the box?
So, first of all, if we're talking about 2000s, the level of development and infrastructure between Ukraine and Western Europe was tremendous. At least it was much more visible than it is now, and even now we have a big difference, right? So many Ukrainian students who traveled to Western European countries and then came back to Ukraine suffered from so-called cultural syndrome, like a cultural
reverse
impact.
culture
Yes,
shock.
yes.
Right, yeah.
A few friends of mine, let's say some architects who visited like a weekly study visit to Vienna, after coming back to Ukraine, they didn't want to leave home. They stayed at home being depressed because like, our trams are not so nice and well equipped as in Vienna, or for many people it was a mystery how the bus can arrive on time according to the schedule, you know.
Right. Okay.
So these things, and definitely the more you see, the more things you have to compare, the more opportunities you see around, and this makes your curiosity grow. You start understanding things better, and very important was that you start implementing those positive practices back in your own society, in your own environment, trying to lift the standards, right? So this was a big impact for me as a young student back then.
Okay, so we fast forward a few years, and you're kind of reaching 100 countries. And from what I understand, you're an influential blogger. Tell us a little bit about your blog at the time and how you were reaching out to the Ukrainian travel communities.
Yeah, so when I finished university, I enrolled in a few international internships, which was Poland, Croatia, and India. And India was really something special because first of all, it was the first country outside of Europe which we visited, and it was the first country which you could say a little bit like lower developed than Ukraine itself. So it showed you some balance, yes. Also, I spent there 6 months, which was a substantial amount of time outside of your comfort zone, outside of the culture you're accustomed to, and that really affected me. So when I was in India, it was 2010, basically more than 10 years ago, I was writing about this. Yes, I was posting some pictures, I was writing. It was a pre-Instagram era, so the Facebook was only like picking up back then. And people started to follow more. They became more and more curious, like what is this guy doing back there? Like really, not normal things what early graduate in Ukraine would do. So my audience started to grow, and when I came back from India, I started to share this. I started to share more personally. Some student organizations were inviting me to talk about my travel experience. I caught the travel bug even further from India, so I had this desire to continue traveling more and more, and I like this like media presence, kind of, so it came very naturally to me, but through years.
Right.
But if you're talking about the blogging as a profession, which actually enabled me to travel, I would say that it's still like a luck, I would say, but there was some calculation to this, that half a year before football championship of Poland in Ukraine, which was held in 2012, I started online like a travel guide in English language about Ukraine, how to buy a train ticket, how to cross the border, and so on, and called it ukrainetravelsecrets.com. So there was a lack of information back then. There was a big demand, and by publishing these how-to travel tips around my native country, this grew into blogging, this grew into career, and eventually I had a travel company for quite a few years, starting with the football championship. So my travel style back then was the following. I was actively working, providing travel services during summer in Ukraine. And then together with my wife, we actually started leaving Ukraine around August and going somewhere far as backpackers for multiple country, multiple month trips, usually somewhere like exotic, warm places. Basically, most of the backpackers, they start this way. So we're talking about Southeast Asia, Central South America, and so on, yes. And it was amazing. It was actually the life that many people were dreaming of. It was something what I was clearly picturing myself a few years prior to that. But things have changed when the war in Ukraine broke up. So Russia basically annexed Crimea, the war in Donbass started, and the tourism stopped in Ukraine. Yes, so I had to figure out what to do next. And having already a pretty extensive experience of online marketing, of running and starting the business, of understanding how things work in general in terms of content projects, online projects, business as a whole, I continued that path, but on the Ukrainian side. So I founded the website called openmind.com.ua, which was about self-help topics, travel itself, and business, yes. And there I started to serve the Ukrainians in Ukraine and outside Ukraine about consulting, about growing their business using different types of online tools, which was supplemented perfectly with the self-help topics, motivation, time management, and obviously the travel, which is a positive outcome of when you make things done.
Well, the Ukrainian travel community is quite vibrant, and it's worth remembering 2019, the year that we first met, when you held a NomadMania event in your native Lviv for Ukrainian travelers.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that event, which took place in September 2019?
Absolutely, I'll tell about this, but a few pretext how Ukrainian community of travelers actually started to grow. So in 2016, Schengen visas have been waived for Ukrainians, meaning that nobody had to apply for a visa to travel to neighboring Poland or other countries, And this opened so many opportunities for people to travel. All these cheap airlines, Visa, Ryanair started to come to our cities. And obviously these are the circumstances which motivate people to travel more and more. And Ukrainians became a pretty significant group in NomadMania itself. But if we're talking about the event, that actually followed our conference in the Azores.
Yes.
So I was lucky enough to participate in one of the NomadMania conference. Actually, big shout out to our common friend Slavek Muturi, another active traveler on NomadMania. And Slavek, I'm really grateful for him because he introduced us.
Indeed.
And somehow he couldn't visit the event, so he knew probably a reliable, interesting guy, Orest, that could substitute him on a level, right? So since then we started to know you, right? We started to keep in touch, and one of the ideas how to, put together more formal Ukrainian travelers, how to participate in active community building of NomadMania itself. I just came up with the idea, why don't we have an event in Ukraine? It happened in 2019. We had well over 100 people on the event.
Yes.
We had some really big travelers over there. So obviously you, Harry. Then there was the biggest Ukrainian traveler who visited every country in the world, Konstantin Simonenko. Then there was the biggest traveler from Ukraine, Konstantin Lyorik, who actually made the most regions. I would say most of the top 20 Ukrainian travelers were there. Yeah. In addition to other people who are really into the topic, we had one of the biggest Polish travelers, Wojciech Dąbrowski. It was a great event and nice combination of public speeches, full hall of people listening to this.
And good food. You cannot fault the food.
Yeah,
in
some
Ukraine.
food, some after party. That was a solid event with many moving parts together. And
what I remember from that was when you were all at this restaurant with a map of Ukraine, and I had told you, you get to rearrange Ukraine since this is a democratic exercise, and you were begging NomadMania to give Ukraine another region. And I was like, no, you can't have another region because this is already maybe generously divided for Ukraine, and you needed, and it was quite a heated discussion. Yeah?
Oh yeah, so basically one of the missions of NomadMania is to provide a well understanding of the world, right? And the way how Ukrainian was divided back then didn't really make sense in terms of understanding it. It was just cut within the administrative borders of provinces and so on. So in order to give it like more this cultural, geographical feel, and enhance people to understand, like when they travel, to explain why it's that done. We printed like the maps of Ukraine, and I gave it to different people. They were divided into groups, drawing how would they. Obviously, there is always a challenge because there is always not enough of regions to make it the most proper way, but it was pretty strict, and I believe the current division that we have is the closest to the essence as far as we can get.
Yeah, and I can say that it is the only case where we have had sort of a democratic division of the country by a huge number of travelers from that country itself.
And this is very important stuff, because locals always, know things more,
well,
right?
Obviously, yeah. Now, Orest, in all of those trips that you had to Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, give us one story, if you want, that stands out, that really affected you and that you will never forget.
I mean, definitely, as every traveler, I've got many stories, but the one that affect you and stand out and really like guide you further in life, these stories come from your early experience, right? I would say. So I clearly remember the early first years when cheap airlines were entering Ukraine. It was in 2007 or 2008. There was a Wizz Air flight, newly established flight from Kyiv to Oslo. I was still a student. I was still a university student. So I took that flight and flew to Oslo. Like, obviously, the cost of the flight was less than one day, in Oslo itself. But anyway, and I was limited in time and budget. So I took this Norway in a nutshell trip. It's a one-day trip that from Oslo you take a train, it takes you up in the mountains.
The Flam railway, or
it's one of the highest elevated railway in Europe, And then from the top, from the pass, you sit into another like smaller train that takes you down the curvy road to the start of the fjord. There you change into the ferry, and along the ferry you get into the bus, which takes you then to Bergen. Like that's the full day trip. It calls Norway in a nutshell. It has a nice package. You can buy it in the railway station and so on. And we were like I was already going through this ferry in the middle of amazing fjord, and you see the landscape like from Lord of the Rings around you. It was April. Pretty chilly still back then, and I was standing outside trying to get some pictures, and another guy showed up, much older than me, probably in his late 40s, early 50s, and we had a small chat with him. I took picture of him, he took picture of me, we exchanged some our backstories. The only thing I remember from him is that he was working as the gardener, like landscape designer, which is more cool name for that profession, in Barcelona. I'm a student from Ukraine. Our ferry landed in near Bergen. That's it. Never seen each other, never exchanged any contacts, email, nothing. And then I travel. Then my life goes on. I did these internships, and I find myself in India. 2010, I did my internship, and then it was part of the time when I was traveling in the Himalayas, Jammu Kashmir area, right?
Okay.
And Himachal Pradesh, a little bit southern. And it was very interesting time because Dalai Lama just turned 70 years old, as far as I remember. So basically he was in Dharamsala, in this mountain town, with so many monks, with so many high-profile people from all around the world. And I was there at the same time with my friend. So in order to kind of melt with the crowd, we cut our hair, bought these orange monk outfits, and we're walking on the streets, joining the crowds, the festivals, and so on. And I walk, and I have very good facial memory. So, and I remember like this face, I probably seen it somewhere. So I approach closer, and I recognized the guy by his camera. Because it has some kind of like a huge lens. So I remember I was holding this camera, taking picture of him in Norway. So I approached the guy, hugged him. He got afraid because from a teenager, I already grew up.
Yeah.
I was bold. So yeah, but then I explained him. He's like, yeah, I remember you, you know. So then like, wow, this amazing meeting. So let's sit down and talk. And we, you know, for like another 2 hours, we were telling what happened in our life in this like 3-year period between our meetings. And after this, we never seen each other again. But the life story here is that, you know, the time when we met, it was your top euphorical happiness moment. Because like, how is that even possible?
Yeah,
Like,
to meet someone you know from somewhere.
Who is the likelihood? Yes. So this was, first of all, it told me stay with the good terms with people, on the good terms with people, because if, let's say, we had some argument in Norway, maximum what would happen in Dharamsala is like just have a quick look and that's it, yeah? Second, you never know what life brings you. Everything comes around, everything is illuminated, and it's kind of, you know, can appear very unexpectedly. And travelers have more chances to meet in this world. Because if you think so, most people stay in their place all the time. If travelers move around, it means that probably they have more chances to meet unless, you know, because they don't stay and they move around.
True. Yeah? And the more obscure the place, the more likely you're going to meet a traveler.
Yeah. So that moment really is very memorable for me. I'm very grateful. And this is just one of the example of many different crazy, amazing stories and meetings I had all around the world. Yeah.
All right, Orest. So, well, you're from Ukraine, and unfortunately, your country is in recent months known not by positive news. Why don't you briefly tell us how the war in Ukraine has affected your life?
Well, that's a very tough topic, obviously, and we can record a few more interviews only about this. In general, I feel sad that this happened in my country. I am still based in Lviv. I live in Lviv. This is my choice. Actually, I came back to Ukraine to participate in and, you know, to stay with my country when actually the war happened. You remember just 1 week prior to the Russian invasion, we were in Karabakh together on another NomadMania trip, and I remember how every group member was worrying about me. You know, people were, some of them were persuading not to go, but it just like felt right to do this. Yeah. I never thought that such devastation that me as a traveler seen in many conflict zones around the world sometimes will happen in Ukraine. And when it happened, you just have to act. You have to act, you have to take the decisions what to do, how to participate. And I became partially a reporter. So basically I put aside many of my previous things that I've been working on. And for the first year, actively participated as a reporter, organizing media trips, working with journalists, attracting as much aid from international organizations to Ukraine as possible, talking on the conferences about Ukraine. It was like a full-time, serious work. And it's ongoing, you know, like we just have to ask ourselves, what can we do to be the most effective? Which will provide the biggest impact.
What has your greatest lesson been in the past year or so?
I think that you start realizing how big is the scale and how many people are involved. It's something that you cannot change just by yourself. Like what you start realizing in this situation is, you know, that you really don't, like, that you have to act in the things and levels where you can make an impact. This is probably very important because, you know, we as a human beings, we tend to worry about many things, obviously about the war, but about so many other things in life. And people usually, you know, take something too much personal, or they talk, they think too much about all around, like all the mess which is happening during our lifetime. And war is an example that it's such a huge scale, and obviously such a big tragedy, and everybody wanted to finish, but it's still not finishing. So for me, the biggest lesson was that doesn't matter how bad things happen, try to cut the piece that you can handle and work with it. That's probably, I would say, yeah.
Very, very great piece of wisdom there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move to NomadMania. You've been a member of NomadMania now for what, 4 years, I suppose. What do you like best about NomadMania?
The first initial idea of NomadMania, as I suppose, was to show the beauty of the world and encourage people to travel deeper, just beyond countries, but going deeper into the regions. Basically, that's why the entire map of possible visited places is cut to over 1,301 regions. And this what fascinates me from the first point, because I was always into maps. Since I was 3 years old, there were like all types of maps in my bedroom. And as soon as I studied all the capitals, you know, my father put a physical map. Then I studied all the mountain ranges, oceans, deserts. He put like another one with a like tectonic map. So I was cutting, you know how it works. Like some geodesical like type of soil in different countries. You know, I was really into this. So this was the first what attracted me. And definitely I study. I spent hours just browsing mouse on the area, trying to understand different things. Secondly, as a traveler, if I see something on the map which stands out, I try to picture how would it look like in real life, and I cannot get settled until I see it with my own eyes.
Right.
So this was the first point. Second is we are social human beings, and you always want to connect to other people. So NomadMania is the great community with all the listings of travelers divided by different countries and places they've been to. This gives you access to real people with whom you can hang out, with whom you can travel together, from whom you can study a lot, take an advice, and so on. So these things, and then you know, in Azores I met these people live, and I thought like, this is my crew. So yeah.
Okay, so now you're coming in as a partner
Yeah.
of NomadMania. What do you feel this role is going to mean for you personally, and how do you think it's going to change NomadMania itself?
First of all, I'm very grateful, Harry, for this proposal. This means a lot. It was very unexpected for me, obviously.
I like to surprise people.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, during the time we knew each other, when I had the option, I was helping NomadMania a little bit, and we did some tech stuff, these events, and so on. But this is something already like which takes our relations to an absolutely new level. And for me, I would say it was a rather proper timing for this, because before I was all into my own projects. Then like we had the war in Ukraine, and the first year I put myself all there in. Fortunately, we saved the country. I mean, everybody who participated, and you as well, because you also helped a lot, and NomadMania participated too. And you know, you have to look far, you have to develop your vision, and to grow personally, grow professionally. So I would say that the fact that I'm stepping in as a partner means a lot to me personally. It's a great challenge, and it's a huge responsibility with you, with all the people who are watching this, with all the members of NomadMania, and in general, how people will see travelers, how travelers affect our modern society. I will use all my skills that I developed before to help NomadMania grow, which is partially I told you about in this interview. And I see NomadMania to be growing as the community of avid travelers who want to learn more, I see NomadMania to be a platform with much more valuable internal connections between the travelers, will stick people together and develop their curiosity around the world. So we have many plans to develop the project. Probably we should not disclose all of them here and keep people
we like
interested.
surprises.
Yes,
So,
yes.
But one surprise which we can perhaps reveal is where the next NomadMania Awards will take place.
Oh, that's absolutely. I think this is something I've been pushing without my current position, but since the war in Ukraine started, I thought that like one of the best ways to draw awareness, one of the best ways to support local people is to be there, right? Obviously within the security measures and places where it's safe. So guys, this is the official moment to announce that the next NomadMania Awards events will be held in Ukraine, in my native city Lviv, in October 2023.
Indeed. So we hope to have a live event for the first time, which will be televised over YouTube. So it'll be live and connecting the world from Ukraine. And everyone is invited. So, you know, that's going to be big.
I would say that now we can mention that it will not be limited to Lviv. NomadMania is also about the extreme travelers, right? So we will try to create the program in the way that there'll be some add-ons.
Add-ons.
Sorry. Yeah, add-ons to Kyiv and maybe even beyond. So we'll put more details once the entire schedule is done.
Right. So, Orest, we understand that traveling from Ukraine now is rather difficult, but do you have any travel plans for the next few months?
So, as I told, I'm based in Lviv. All the airports are currently closed in Ukraine, and the most convenient way is to travel by rail to Poland. Fortunately, we still have this operating, and there are at least 3 daily trains to border town of Przemysl in eastern Poland, and from there, you go different directions. So basically, for me, it's kind of, in terms of travel and logistics, is a step back to the 2000s when I was going this route many more times. But it also just adds extra day for the departure and arrival. And it adds extra day for some planning, some deep thinking, and going through your pictures when you come back from the trip, right? To tell the truth, me and many Ukrainians are living in a mode where it's really hard to travel over than a month ahead. So it's more agile. Despite this, most of my travel probably will be connected to set up meetings for NomadMania in different places. I would like to visit a few international events where NomadMania can be present as the project itself. Yes, so I would say that recreational travel is probably on hold for me at the moment. It will be more related to what the project can benefit from. I also, when I travel different places, I visit Ukrainian newly established communities there, because there are over 8,000 refugees who left the country since the war started.
You mean 8 million?
8 million, sorry, 8 million,
Yeah.
and this is another big topic. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the point as for now. At the same time, I think it's very important, at least on my personal level, to visit places that also suffered from the conflicts, to understand them better, and maybe bring this knowledge back. So I would say I'm very curious about your upcoming trip to Libya. By this time it's already announced, and we'll see how this works. And at the same time, when I do travel, I remember that I'm the ambassador of NomadMania, first of all, but also ambassador of Ukraine. So whenever it's possible to establish some good connections, I am up for that.
That's interesting. That's what I always tell people, that if you want to be a traveler, the first thing you do is remember that you're an ambassador.
Yeah.
And ultimately, because the first question you get is where are you from, you need to be an ambassador for your country, and always know about your country, know about the culture, and, you know, kind of present it to other people who don't know. Okay, Orest, we always end interviews with our signature question. And that question is, if you could invite any 4 people from any period of human history to dinner, who would be on your guest list and why?
So, first of all, I must say that with people whom I wanted to talk personally, I already had a dinner. One of them is our mutual friend Rauli Virtanen. He is actually like the first person in the history who visited every country in the world all the way back in 1988, as far as I remember.
Impressive, yeah.
That's very impressive. And I'm that kind of the guy who is curious in other people, especially in those from whom I can learn from.
It's funny because he was on my list as well when I had an interview, and then I got to meet him a few months ago, and he's an amazing person.
Yeah. So basically, like, if I see somebody who is very interesting person and I can like sincerely learn from them, I have no problem just writing an email or contacting other way and just, you know, trying to figure out how and where we can meet and buy a plane ticket just to have a dinner with this person, right? Obviously, now the question was about these people that I will not be able to meet already.
Well, you might. I mean.
I might, yeah. So let me think. Okay, I will tell like this. So I would definitely meet, since I'm from Ukraine, I would like to meet Askolt and Dir. So these are very interesting people. They are Vagarians, like the Nordic people who sailed down the Dnieper River, developing a new trade route to Byzantium Empire, and eventually settled in Kiev, kind of like agreeing with local
so
tribes.
Those are the forefathers. Or,
Yes.
Right.
So just curious, like how in those times you would know, instead of going around European peninsula, you would go inland in modern Western Russia and trying to fight your way down the Dnieper across like Belarus, Ukraine to the Black Sea. Second person, okay, he would probably should be first, but this is the one who is probably the most interesting. Is I would definitely like to meet Orestes from Greek mythology.
Oh, your namesake, right?
Yeah. So he was a son of a local prince or king in Peloponnese, not far from here, and he traveled to northern Turkey, modern Black Sea, and Crimean Peninsula, rescuing his sister, taking back to Peloponnese and becoming a king eventually. And while being here in Greece, I really read quite a few myth stories about adventures of Orestes. So this guy. And the third, okay, that's really interesting. Who would be the third? It should be like somebody from the modern era, I would say, or at least, maybe I don't have some personality, but that would be some significant traveler from the Victorian era England. And this time fascinates me a lot because, you know, during the second half of the 19th century, there was already enough technological progress to travel the world. And people, let's say, from royalty societies or some, you know, merchants having enough funds and having access to you know, trips and so on, they could see the world. And I think that was very interesting time because people already, you know, left records, they could communicate between each other through the continents, and cultures just were so much more organic back then, so much raw than now, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly like about the person, but somebody like some member of British Geographical Society in Victorian era England would be like really
It's
cool.
funny that you mentioned someone British, you know. That's interesting. You know, I do feel that Britain of the time has some sort of allure that maybe other countries don't. So yeah, that's interesting.
Those my answers. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Orest. Thank you for your time. It's been great welcoming you to this chat, and see you in Ukraine in October.
Absolutely, and let's carry on with all the surprises and developments of NomadMania, guys, we prepared for you.